So thanks everyone for being here. Our guest speaker today is Bhavik. He's going to be talking about strategic non-dilutive funding, how to scale and grow your business. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Pascal Hansen. I am the co-founder, CEO, and financial strategist at Zeta, and I'm also a tech chair with Tech Canada. So I'll let you take it from here. Take it away,
All
Bhavik.
right, thank you, Pascal, and thank you for everyone for joining. Hopefully everyone can hear me clearly enough. So talking about non-dilutive funding to scale and grow, I'm going to focus on probably a couple of key areas that I really specialize in, and hopefully this is going to be useful to everyone. And any questions, feel free to ask away while I'm presenting. You don't have to wait till the end. So if it comes to your mind, just ask away. So what makes me an expert in this space? So I used to run one of the largest boutique firms, or government funding consulting firm that specialized in tax credits and government grants. Did over $200 million of probably funding to date in maximizing just on government grants. There's a ton of funding out there, and I've worked my way around and navigating on how to specialize in that. Many years of business development marketing. I'm a board advisor on many emerging companies as an advisor, especially when it comes to raising money. That's where I sort of come in and really sort of can advise young companies on how to navigate it more strategically. And then I've also helped companies raise over $180 million in investments just for Canadian companies. So I am connected, and I have a very good colleague of mine that I'm working with very closely from Europe right now on the call. That's Johannes. So we can talk about this offline if there is a need for that as well. So what is non-dilutive funding? So non-dilutive funding is any capital you bring it in and not giving up any equity. And it comes in various different forms, from loans, grants, royalty financing, there's vouchers, and there's tax credits, especially in Canada. And many companies, when they're starting out the gate, sometimes don't spend enough time investigating debt or this non-dilutive solution, which could end up being cheaper than equity in the long run. So it's something that we specialize in. I think advocate founders always to explore this with a bit more detail to grow their business. So tax credits is one form that I'm going to focus on a little bit more specifically on SHRED. There's a variety of different tax credit programs out there, really cool ones like book publishing tax credits, CTC. The most common one that most young tech companies are always claiming, and it's been around since the 1940s and the recent version since the 80s, is scientific research experimental SHRED, which sometimes founders don't maximize on very early enough because they think, well, I'm not paying myself. How can I claim it? I've got to wait till I get some spend. And there are ways around that to tap into that very early on. So SHRED, as I mentioned, it's the largest probably R&D initiative in Canada. It's the second probably largest in the country when it comes to a cash return into the program. So that's why it's very important. Any company that's advancing technology, it doesn't mean you have to be in a lab, creating experiments. 95% of the companies that are applying for this program are in experimental development stage. So whether you're in manufacturing, agriculture, software, you probably should be claiming this. There's over 30,000 companies that apply to this program every year, and it's about $4 billion coming out to CRA government back to these companies. I'm going to probably say 80% of the companies that are getting a part of this $4 billion, it's a cash return. They're not making money. They're still pre-revenue, a lot of these companies, and they should be claiming this. So industries on the tax credit side, everyone can apply for this. Long as you're doing some sort of innovation and taking risk. What does that mean? It means that it doesn't have to be something brand new that you're trying to build. You'd be trying to build something that already exists and improve it, except you don't have the solution for it because it hasn't been released. And so you can still claim this program. So to identify a SHRED project when you guys are starting out is, it can be a brand new product, could be a new process, or as I said, innovating an existing product or process. So the first thing you're going to do is due diligence. So is it on the internet? Is there a solution with suppliers? You know, there's something exists out there. And if there isn't anything there that really resolves what you're trying to do, that's being said, okay, we've got something that's eligible here for us to claim every year. Now, this, when you're claiming SHRED, it doesn't have to be a complete project. It's all about spending that fiscal year period that you've done to try and get to your goal that you've been trying to achieve. So a very simple way to understand this tax credit in particular, is think of it as a high school experiment. You have a hypothesis, you have an idea, you do some research, and then you start applying the methods that you think that will make it successful. Now, if it goes exactly as planned from A to B, there's nothing to claim there. But if you go through it, a failure, an objective that comes alongside this didn't work, and not just throwing mud at the wall hoping it sticks, with some justified reason of why you're going to tweak the plan or readjust the hypothesis a little bit to make it work, and you do, let's say, 3 kicks at the can, I typically say, you have an eligible project to go and claim some funding. So it's very important, as I said, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you're trying to improve something and advance knowledge in the sector that you're in, there's a high likely chance there's something you can get back for the spend that you're making, the work that you're doing. So eligible projects for SHRED, typically, as I said, you're trying to repeat, trying to figure things out, and it doesn't have to be successful. If you spend the whole year or 6 months or 7 months trying to achieve a goal and you end up shelving it, that whole project is claimable. Or you're still continuing year 2, year 3, all the money and time you've spent on that will be a claimable project. Typical activities is engineering, there's technical discussions. So sometimes a lot of founders, they may not be doing the physical work. They might not be the engineers, they might not be the developers, but it's still involved. That time is also claimable. On the engineering side, what's very interesting is a lot of the SHRED, when you're trying to claim SHRED, you're doing it pre-construction sometimes. For example, if you were building bridges, you're not going to build a bridge, wait for it to collapse to realize your method and your experiment failed. You're going to try and figure out the kinks in the early stages of building prototypes, smaller versions, structural, and math, science, that you're going to get involved to realize this is going to fail. And because you might be trying to use new materials or new methods of putting something together. Something like software and stuff, you'll realize after the fact, once you've developed, something breaks, it doesn't integrate with the accounting systems, your API works for about 6 months, and something else breaks. So software is always after the fact. Stuff like engineering, sometimes the sciences stuff is done pre-bulk manufacturing or bulk production for it to qualify. Now, typically when you're doing this, you're filing with the CRA, just like personal taxes, but for your company. These are the 5 areas of questions that the CRA is going to be looking at. Most companies will use a consultant to help them navigate through SHRED because there's things that have to be written in a certain way to make a successful claim. If it sounds like routine engineering, routine development, your claim's going to get cut. So there's specialists out there. There's probably about 250 consulting firms in Canada that specialize in just doing SHRED. So as long as you guys are answering these questions and you can show the innovation and advance knowledge, which is the key thing, it's going to be a successful claim that you're going to claim back. So what can you claim? So this is really important for very young founders and young companies, is if you're making less than 800,000 taxable net income, the return's going to come back as a form of cash. Yes, it's a tax credit, but doesn't actually get applied to your corporate taxes. You'll get a check in the mail or deposit into your bank account, and you can spend it on whatever you like. Take your team to Vegas or reinvest in the company like most companies do. What you're going to get back, and this is really important, you'll get 65% on the low end of your salary costs back. If you're using Canadian contractors, you'd get 32% of that back. And if you're using materials to build prototypes that can't be resold or commercialized, you would get 42% of that back. So it turns out to be quite a substantial amount of money that you're getting back in cash, especially if majority of your spend is going to be on salaries like it normally is typically for most companies. Now, if you're a founder and you're right at the early stage, but you're not paying yourself and you're just doing sweat equity, there is ways around that where as long as you pay the payroll taxes, and we can talk about this in more detail if someone's interested on how that works, still to make an eligible claim so you can get that cash return for the hard work you did. I encourage founders to look at that opportunity because sometimes if you spend 3 years in sweat equity developing this project and all of a sudden now it's at the MVP stage and it's now just commercialization, you're going to lose out on all that money and time you spent getting the product to where it is. So it's very important to investigate on that. Now, if you're a large company or foreign owned, you can still apply for SHRED, except you're just going to get half the amount back that I've stated, and it will be applied to your corporate taxes. And if you don't owe any taxes, it can be carried forward, right? So when you do start growing, just apply to that. So again, a very important program for companies to use. Now, a shred process, it's not as complicated as in here. Typically, if you're working internally or if you're doing it with a consultant, you're going to identify the projects. And typically, I would advise everyone that when you do a project title, make sure you use the title of the actual uncertainty. You know, the objection that comes up, what you're trying to overcome. Because if you're applying for government grants and you don't do that, it could cut into each other. So there's ways to maximize, which I'll get into in the next few slides. But typically, you identify the project, you do technical interviews, which is a bit more finding out what went wrong, how did you overcome, what methods did you take. Then financial data is literally salaries and invoices that you spent towards this project. And then you have a technical write-up to sort of put it all together, and then you submit the claim. Good consultants, if they have the data, can get this completed in 2 to 3 weeks. Doesn't matter how large your team is or how small your team is. Typically on the technical interviews, you just want to deal with the head engineer, the head developer to get the real nitty gritty stuff that went wrong. If you're not currently claiming shred or haven't got anything in place, you don't have to have any fancy software to sort of capture this data. You can simply use email and create an email address to say shred at your company domain. And then any work that you're doing on the project to capture hours or iterations, just carbon copy that email. If you have a meeting and you have whiteboard notes, take a picture, send it to the email address. Because what's going to happen is you're going to go back when you're running a clinic. What went wrong in the last 12 months? And you want to educate your staff to say, if you guys are working at home, working on failures, we need to know, because now every hour and every minute is claimable. There's a lot of staff members that, I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to tell my boss that, I can't figure this out. But now if you know it's worth money, I'll start working on it and getting that for you guys. So it's very important on the shred side of that. Any questions on shred? Nope. Okay, I shall continue. So government grants is probably the key to success, especially for scaling strategically and growing. There's over $10 billion of funding available every year from the government, federally and provincially available. And now, most of these programs do require financial contribution to qualify for matching funds, but we have a method to unlock that with my company, and we'll get into that. But 95% of these programs are non-refundable. They're not loans. You're not paying it back. It's going to be offsetting costs towards your project, what you're trying to achieve as you're trying to grow. Now, some of these programs, they reimburse you based on spend. Some of it's based on milestones. Programs do take anywhere from 3 to 4 months for approval, but if you strategically plan this correctly, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that are available, anywhere from $10,000 for hiring someone all the way to $4 or $5 million for scaling and growing and buying equipment. So the website I've got there, Hello Pocket, is a platform for companies to use to access the programs or see where they are, and then you can sort of navigate. It sort of helps them out. So I've just put it there because I think it's one of the most user-friendly platforms on the market right now when you're looking for government programs. So how can you be successful with government grants? You can't just apply and hopefully they'll give you a yes straight away. The first step is you've got to create a high-level mini business plan where you would spend money in the next 3 to 18 months to grow your business. Is it going to be more R&D? Is it going to be, I need 3 or 4 hires in marketing or development or engineering? Commercialization costs, do I need to spend money in marketing? Do I need to go to trade shows? Do I need to sort of fly clients in? Or is it buying equipment? So you've got to have sort of a high-level plan, because when you're doing research on government programs and sorts of platforms, it's easier to navigate when you have a plan. Okay, I had money for this. This is how I can grow the business. Anything over $50,000, if you're going to go for a program, do not just do an application and submit it. It will not go anywhere. The difference between government grants and tax credits is tax credits are an entitlement. If you spend the money, you tick the boxes, and you're being innovative. It's your right to get the money back every year because you've spent money. Government grants work a little bit like the mafia. It's all about relationship building. You've got to talk to a program manager. You've got to get them to believe in your project, whether it's an R&D grant, a hiring grant, a marketing grant, a green grant. The number one thing these program managers are doing is that you have the ambition to scale and grow and the plan to scale and grow, which means hiring more people, more Canadians and residents to grow your business. And the reason that's key to being successful and being appealing to government programs is they want to see more tax dollars going into the system. So if you're hiring people, there's payroll tax in the system. If you're making sales, there's taxes going back in the system. If you just want to get money to grow and sell it for the highest bidder, you're not very appealing to any of these government programs. So it's very important to establish that relationship. Typically, if you open up one program, they may open up doors to other programs. And year after year, some programs will just keep doubling their funding fee because they don't have to re-vet you and they like it. So again, relationships are very important. A good example of this is I was doing a workshop about a couple of weeks ago at an Angel Forum event, and the IRAP ITAs were there, was like 3 or 4 of them. And they agreed with what I said. It's about relationships, it's about checking in, keeping updated, talking to them on a regular basis. Even if they say, we don't have any money right now, they want to see if you're serious. So you go back to them a couple of weeks later or a month later, hey, is anything unlocked for us now? And if you build that up, it will help you in the long run to get funding. So most of the money right now is in these 5 areas: R&D, business growth, hiring and training, green initiatives, and capital expenditure. So on the R&D side, you've got typical programs like IRAP, SDTC. These are a few to mention. Now, the important thing about understanding R&D grants is it will come into your shred fund if you don't manage it correctly. So what does that mean? So once you get approved for R&D funding, utilize that money for routine work, routine engineering. So anything that's not covered by the grant, you can then utilize it for your shred. So now, if you get both programs, you can follow your R&D spend by almost 100%, if not more sometimes. So it's very important to establish that. So you change the project title straight off the bat. The R&D grant could be the overall project name, and then the shred would be based on the failure or the objective that you're trying to overcome. I've mentioned 4 programs here, but there's a ton of programs depending on the industry you're in. Like if you're in Alberta and you're doing something in clean tech, ERA has a ton of funding in for research as well. Alberta Innovates, so Ontario Centre of Excellence has a ton of programs out there for innovation as well. So depending on the provinces, some other provincial R&D programs, but these are some common federal ones that companies can go after. HR and training grants, this is probably the biggest area of funding available nationally. Typically, the government's trying to get more young people into the workforce and stay in Canada, legally to the US or wherever else in Europe. So right now, typically in BC, there's about 34 hiring programs right now. If your company's in growth mode right now, especially for marketing, the digital marketing right now, there's a program that can give you up to $30,000 an intern as many as you want. That's a lot of funding. If you end up taking 5 interns in a year, that's $150,000 to the salary. And that's just one area of funding available, and all these little dollars do add up. So there's a variety of hiring programs for R&D associates. There's some for seasonal hires. Some hiring programs are focused on just agriculture. So, there's a program, and typically most of these grants are very easy to get when it comes to hiring. The training grants, which is a federal program managed provincially, can get up to $10,000 per employee for third-party training. So if there's an issue for retaining staff or things like that, this could be a good incentive to have in the system. Now, one tip that I like to give a lot of companies when they're going after hiring grants is, if you can get approved for a hiring grant, it could make you more competitive in the market to grab talent. So instead of matching $80,000 salary, you could maybe perk it up because now you've got a grant to offset those costs instead of just offsetting it completely. So it makes you more competitive in the market when you get these grants as well. Next area is business growth grants. There's a variety of programs that chop and change all the time. Right now, Canada Export is just reopened, where you can get up to $50,000 to do trade shows, travel, marketing, getting boots on the ground, legal costs, or entering a new market. There's some industry-specific programs out there if you're in agriculture or in exporting, particularly. EDC has some great investment programs, part of marketing as well, that you could get. Some of the other grants like IRAP have some small programs that don't really advertise, but potentially you get $20,000 to do commercialization activities. So there is funding out there to grow your business commercially. If you complete your R&D and MVP, that's going to not be as much. Now it's just going to penetrate the market. You need to utilize these programs that are available out there. Capital expenditure grants, there is a ton out there provincially, but typically they're focused on manufacturing and agriculture companies. So there's not thousands of them out there, but there are some particularly good ones. Now, right now, if you wanted to set up a new facility for manufacturing, in BC, there's a program that will give you up to $10 million, but it has to be outside the lower mainland. You have to be like towards Kelowna, Kamloops, or going that way to access that capital. Or if you wanted to have more of the eastern presence, then Southern Ontario has a program that gives you up to $5 million, and the minimum requirement is to hire 8 people over 2 years. So there's a variety of programs depending on how you want to grow your business. You can have in 2 or 3 entities to tap into sort of expenditure programs are out there. Then you've got green and clean tech grant. This is the biggest mandate for probably most provinces right now, and there's a ton of different options and funding initiatives out there, whether you're in EV technology or just clean or doing carbon credit initiatives. So right now, this is a hot area for funding, and there are larger funding initiatives in this space particularly. Pacific and Prairies does cover clean tech, but it covers all industries as well. That's typically a government loan where you can get up to $5 million and it's interest-free for 5 years. If you have a plan to grow and scale right now, Pacific Can is one program you guys should definitely go after. Get in there right now, speak to the program managers, because it is a lot of funding at an interest-free to go and get that. So where do I come into this? So we're a financing and funding company, but we leverage these programs to get access and capital to companies early. We advance the funds. So pretty much on tax credits, we'll lend up to 75%, whether you're about to file, you already have your number, you've just filed, or you have accrued spend, and you need cash really quickly. So it's something we leverage. So this is an asset that a lot of founders aren't aware they can leverage with funding with us, with Bonsai. Same with government grants. Where we really make an impact for young companies, or actually all companies in the government grant space, is we can provide LOIs, LOCs, and term sheets to help you secure government programs at no cost. So typically, a lot of these programs where a lot of companies fall on the first hurdle is they don't have the matching funds. They're still trying to raise money so they can qualify for the grant. If I'm at my desk and you're looking to get all the missing pieces, you can get that within 10 minutes. It's non-binding. It doesn't mean you have to come back to me to borrow money. It's really to get you over the hurdle. Once you get over that hurdle, you have 3 options. Option 1 is you can use your rainy day fund, friends and families to go utilize the government grants. Option 2 is you can put it on your investment deck. Now that government cash is yours, but you end up giving away less equity and you're more attractive to investors for knowing you've got government support to grow your business. It's a bit of a longer process right now in Canada to raise money, but we're connected to a group in Europe that are very active in investing in Canada right now. So there's always a solution for that as well. Still not a quick process, but it's a process that's moving a lot quicker than Canadian investors right now. And option 3, which is probably the quickest route to cash, is you come back to me, say, look, we've just been approved for $500,000 in whatever program it is, and we'd like to leverage that. In both instances with tax credits and government grants, that's the only security I take. We don't take personal guarantees. We don't take an equity stake. We literally leverage the programs to get money to companies. Because hurdle number 2 is, as you're trying to get the money spent, most of these programs do not give you money up front. They'll give you an approval, they'll give you a contract, you have to go spend or hit a milestone at your own cost to then get the reimbursement. So that's where we come in and sort of fill that gap with bridge lending, what we specialize in. So it's all non-dilutive without giving away equity. Now, the important thing to understand with the non-dilutive side is we also work with a lot of investment groups, investment. So if you're trying to do a raise, as I said, we'll bridge the gap because we can leverage these programs. Sometimes investors come to us and say, look, we really love this company. We want to give them $500,000, but we want to spread the love. We want to invest in 2 different companies. So we'll come and look under the hood, see what we can get with non-dilutive, and then they can come in with a missing piece to complete that raise for companies.
So Addie has a question, Bhavik?
Fire away.
Go ahead, Addie.
Thank you for that. I just want to clarify on the green, what do you call it? I think there was a slide before this one. The green grants? No. Yeah, okay. On the green and clean tech grants, does this apply to small businesses like a car wash, for instance? We're working on a roll-up in that space, and we're trying to take advantage of opportunities like this as well. So
it applies to it applies for every size of company. So where it comes down to is when you apply for your grant, what are you going to be spending, right? It all comes into what you're spending money on for this initiative. So let's just say, for example, Ocean Supercluster as a program, they really love you. They love the technology and say, you know what, your project spend is going to be, I don't know, $300,000. They may say, you know, we like it. We understand your project's going to be 300,000, but we're going to give you 150. They typically like to offer you 50% of your project costs. And then you can go, so you can go after any program. You don't have to be a certain size. It really comes down, do you have a plan to spend and do you have access to capital? Because if you don't have access to capital, they're just going to say, come back to us when you actually have money, because you got to understand with the government, this is taxpayers' money that they're using. So they want to make sure companies have the sources to put skin in the game. There was a time, let's say before 2013, where you could get 100% funding. And a lot of companies misused the spend. They didn't use it where it's supposed to be. Now the rule is every company, if they want to go after grant, whether you're a small business or a large corporation, you've got to put skin in the game to qualify.
Okay, so
which we
what about a situation where I already spent, let's say I have a project cost of 200,000 and I'd already spent, let's say 100,000 or $50,000. If I apply for the grant, would that money that I spent count towards the contribution?
No. So every government grant, how it works is you can't spend money on that project until it's been approved. Anything you spent prior to that cannot be. It's all about new spend. If it's about spend coming back, if that's more purely focused on R&D. So if you spend money on innovation and R&D, then you can claim that back. But if it's for hiring people, things like that, no, you have to wait for the approval before you spend $1.
Okay. All right. I will talk more after this. Thanks.
And Johannes has a question as well. Go ahead, Johannes.
Yeah, thanks, Pascal. Thanks, Bhavik, for the presentation. Short question. I was missing any energy-related projects in the grants.
Oh, that'll come under the green and clean tech. So it's just broadly highlighted.
Okay.
So otherwise people start asking for very specific industries in these presentations and end up taking 3 hours.
Thank you, Bhavik, as always.